I was standing at the back of the ballroom when my boss walked onto that stage and told 400 people he had built the thing that I had built. The lights were warm and gold. There was a slide behind him with a name on it, Project Meridian, and it was my name for it, the name I'd typed into a blank folder at 2 a.m., 2 years earlier when it was nothing but an idea and a spreadsheet. Derek stood in front of that slide in a suit that cost more than my first car, and he said the word I 40 times in 8 minutes. I counted. I've always been good at counting things other people don't think to count. That, as it turns out, is the whole story. When I set out to build Meridian, he said, people told me it couldn't be done. Nobody had told Derek anything, because Derek hadn't set out to build anything. Derek had walked past my desk 11 months earlier, glanced at my screen, and said, "What's this?" And I, stupid with the pride of someone who has finally made something good, had told him. The room gave him a standing ovation. The CEO shook his hand. Somewhere in the third row, my own director was clapping, beaming, and when I caught her eye, she gave me a little thumbs up, as if to say, "Isn't it wonderful what your team accomplished?" Your team, Derek's team, not my system, not the 400 nights. Derek's. I clapped too. I want you to understand that. I stood at the back of that ballroom and I clapped until my palms stung, with a calm, pleasant expression on my face, because I had already decided what I was going to do, and none of it required me to make a sound. They gave Derek a promotion that night, vice president. A bonus I would later learn was $90,000, and they gave me, 3 weeks later, a notice that my position was being restructured. What none of them knew, what Derek especially did not know, was that Project Meridian would not survive without me. And I was about to prove it in the most patient, expensive, undeniable way possible. Let me tell you what the system was, because the size of it matters. My name is Maya. I was a senior analyst at a logistics company, the kind of unglamorous business that moves other companies' products around the country in trucks and containers, and makes its money in the razor-thin margins between what a shipment costs and what a client will pay. The whole industry lives and dies on pricing. Quote too high, you lose the contract. Quote too low, you move freight at a loss. For decades, our company priced the way everyone did. A room full of experienced people making educated guesses. I thought we could do better. On my own time, at first, I started building a model, a system that pulled in fuel prices, weather, port congestion, seasonal demand, historical rates, 100 variables, and predicted the exact price at which we'd win a contract and still make money. I taught myself things I didn't know. I stayed late for months, and slowly, quietly, the thing started to work. It didn't just work, it was extraordinary. In its first full quarter running live on a slice of our accounts, Meridian improved margins on those contracts by 19%. 19%, in an industry that fights wars over half a point. Scaled across the company, the finance team estimated Meridian was worth somewhere between $14 and $20 million a year. I built that, alone mostly, with a couple of engineers I pulled in near the end to help me productionize it. I have the commit history. I have the design documents with my name in the author field and dates going back 2 years. I have the emails, including the one where Derek, 11 months before that ballroom, wrote, "Maya, can you put together a one-pager on your pricing thing so I can show it upstairs?" My pricing thing, in writing, from him. He showed it upstairs. He just forgot to mention whose thing it was. And once the executives were excited, once the number 14 to 20 million was in the air, it became very convenient for Derek to let a small misunderstanding about ownership grow into a large one. He started saying we. Then he started saying my team. Then, on that stage, he said I. And here is the thing about a system as complex as Meridian. The people applauding it had no idea how it worked. Not the CEO, not the board, not Derek. Especially not Derek. To them it was magic, a black box that printed money. They didn't need to understand it. They only needed the one person who did to keep the lights on. They restructured that person out of the building. The meeting was 9 minutes long. I timed that too. HR was there, and my director, and a document that used the word redundancy, as though a company could have too many people who understood the system, making it $20 million a year. My director could not look at me. She talked about difficult decisions and headcount and the direction of the org. Derek was not in the room. Derek, newly a vice president, was apparently too senior now to attend the firing of the woman who had made him one. They offered me a severance, 3 months, contingent on my signing a stack of paperwork, non-disparagement, a general release, and folded in among the standard language, a clause assigning to the company any and all intellectual property related to my work. I read every page. I have always read every page. It is the single most useful habit I own. And I noticed something the person who drafted it had not. The IP assignment covered work created in the course of employment. But Meridian's earliest foundations, the core forecasting engine, the actual mathematical heart of it, I had built before I was ever assigned to pricing, on my own equipment, on my own time. As a personal project, I had merely brought with me. There was a paper trail proving exactly that, because I am the kind of person who keeps paper trails the way other people keep spare batteries. Just in case. I did not point this out. Why would I? I simply declined to sign the enhanced release, took the smaller standard severance I was owed regardless, packed my 1 box, and left. My director hugged me at the elevator and told me I was so talented and would land somewhere amazing. The doors closed on her hopeful, guilty face. In the parking lot, I sat in my car. I do my best thinking in parked cars, and I did not cry, and I did not rage. I opened my laptop and I looked at the folder I had backed up to my personal drive months earlier, entirely within my rights, the reference copy of my own pre-employment work. And I thought about Derek on that stage saying I. And I made a list. Not a revenge list. I want to be precise about this because what I did was not sabotage. I never touched their systems again. I never deleted a line, never planted a bug, never did one single thing that a lawyer could point to. Everything that happened next happened because of what I did not do and what I quietly, legally, made sure I could prove. The list was just this, the things only I knew, and it was long. A system like Meridian is not the code. People think it's the code. The code was maybe the easy 40%. The rest was in my head, which data sources were reliable and which lied. The 3 vendors whose feeds broke constantly and had to be babied. The seasonal quirks I'd hand-tuned over months. The way Gulf Coast fuel prices needed a manual adjustment every hurricane season. The way one enormous client's shipments followed a pattern that would wreck the model's assumptions if you didn't know to exclude them. There was a retraining process that had to be run every few weeks, by hand in a specific order, or the model would slowly, invisibly, begin to drift, to make worse and worse predictions, while looking exactly as confident as ever. I had done that retraining quietly, every 3 weeks for over a year. Nobody knew I did it. It wasn't in a document, because I'd always meant to write the document when things slowed down. And things never slowed down. To Derek and the executives, Meridian was a machine that simply ran. They had no idea it was actually a machine that ran because a woman they'd just fired went in every 3 weeks and turned a set of cranks that existed only in her memory. I knew that when I left, Meridian would not break. That was the elegant, terrible part. It would not break loudly on day one, with alarms and an obvious disaster that someone could trace back to my absence. It would degrade. Slowly. Silently. It would keep printing prices with total confidence, and those prices would get a little worse each week. And by the time anyone noticed the margins slipping, months would have passed and the trail would be cold. And no one, least of all Derek, would understand why the magic was leaking out of the box. I could have warned them. I could have written the document, trained a successor, left a clean handoff, been the bigger person. That is what you're supposed to do. But nobody had been the bigger person for me. Derek had stood on a stage and taken my 2 years and worn them like a suit. So I decided to let Meridian be exactly as good as the people who claimed to have built it. I would not lift one finger to break it. I would simply stop being the secret reason it worked, and I would wait. Patience, again. It's the only weapon I've ever really needed. 6 weeks after they walked me to the elevator, I took a job at our biggest competitor. I want to be careful here, because this is where people assume I did something underhanded, and I didn't. I did not take a single file that wasn't legally mine. I did not take client lists, or their code, or their data. I took the one thing that was unambiguously, permanently mine, and could never be assigned away in any document: my own mind. The way I think. The knowledge of how to build a thing like Meridian from nothing, because I had already done it once from nothing. The competitor, I'll call them Vantage, because the real name doesn't matter, had been getting quietly slaughtered on pricing for 2 years, and they had no idea how. They kept losing contracts by mysteriously precise margins to my old company. They thought their sales team was failing. Their sales team was not failing. Their sales team was being beaten by my algorithm, contract after contract, and they'd never known there was an algorithm at all. I sat in the interview and I did not mention Meridian by name, and I did not need to. I simply explained, in general terms, what was possible, what a real pricing system could do. The 19%. The room went very quiet. The VP of Sales at Vantage looked at me the way you look at someone who has just explained the last 2 years of your professional life. They made me an offer before I reached the parking lot. Director of Pricing Strategy, nearly double my old salary, and a title with the word director in it that my old company had restructured me out of. I started building. From scratch, clean, mine, a new system, better than Meridian because I got to make all the decisions right the second time. It would take months to come online. That was fine. I had learned the value of a long fuse. And across town, right on the schedule I'd predicted, Meridian began to drift. I heard about it in pieces, the way you hear about weather in a country you used to live in. A former colleague, one of the engineers I'd pulled in at the end, a good one named Priya who had always known exactly whose system it really was, started texting me. At first it was gossip. Then it was worried gossip. Meridian's numbers were getting strange. Contracts they should have won, they were losing. Contracts they won, the margins were coming in thin, sometimes underwater. Nobody could figure out why. The model looked healthy. It ran without errors. It produced confident predictions. The predictions were just quietly, increasingly wrong. Derek, now a vice president with his name on the whole thing, was under pressure for the first time in his life. He'd spent his political capital taking credit for Meridian. Now Meridian was his, completely his, and it was failing, and he had absolutely no idea how to fix a system he had never understood in the first place. He couldn't even ask the right questions, because he didn't know what the machine was actually doing. He'd never turned a single crank. They brought in consultants. The consultants billed a fortune and produced slide decks and could not fix it, because the problem was not in any file they could read. The problem was a retraining ritual that lived in the memory of a woman who now worked across town. Priya told me they held a meeting where someone finally asked, "Wait, who was doing the model retraining before?" And the room went quiet, and somebody eventually said, "I think that was Maya's." Maya's, my name, said out loud in that building for the first time in months, and only because something had broken that only I knew how to fix. Here is the moment I want you to sit with, because I sat with it for a long time. Derek, Vice President Derek, $90,000 bonus Derek, standing ovation Derek, asked HR to quietly find out whether I might be available to consult. To come back discreetly and fix the thing he had told 400 people he built. I thought about that request for 3 full days before I answered. I wanted to enjoy it slowly. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I'd been waiting for the phone to ring since the day the elevator doors closed. But I said yes on my terms, and my terms were a document, because I had learned from watching Derek that whoever controls the paperwork controls the story. I would consult. My rate would be $450 an hour, with a 40-hour minimum retainer, paid in advance. And the engagement letter, which I wrote myself, and which their legal department was too panicked about the bleeding margins to fight, contained a single additional clause that I had thought very carefully about. The clause stated, in clean and unarguable language, that any pre-existing intellectual property I brought to the engagement remained mine, and that my work on Meridian would be documented in a formal technical report, authored by me, describing the system's architecture, its maintenance requirements, and its development history. Its development history, they signed it. They were losing money every single day Meridian drifted. They'd have signed almost anything. Derek, I'm told, didn't even read it. Derek never read anything. That was always the difference between us. So I came back for 6 weeks as a consultant paid roughly 4 times my old hourly wage to fix the system I'd been fired for building. I walked back into that building past the same reception desk, and I turned the cranks, and I ran the retraining in the right order, and I retuned the seasonal adjustments, and Meridian slowly, gratefully, came back to life. The margins recovered. The bleeding stopped. The executives were thrilled. And I wrote my technical report. 41 pages, meticulous, accurate, cited. It described exactly how Meridian worked, and in a calm, factual section titled Development History, it laid out the timeline of the system's creation, with dates, with commit records, with the design documents, with the authorship. It was not accusatory. It didn't need to be. It simply told the truth in the flat, undeniable voice of documentation, and it was now an official deliverable, paid for by the company, filed in their own records, addressed to the executive team. I handed it in on my last day, and then I went back across town to build the thing that would beat them. The report went to the CEO because a 41-page technical document about a $20 million system goes to the CEO. That was always going to happen. I didn't have to send it to him. I just had to be honest inside a document they had contractually required me to write. He read it. Unlike Derek, the CEO read things. And somewhere around page 29, in the development history section, he read a timeline that did not match the story he'd applauded in a gold-lit ballroom. He saw dates that predated Derek's involvement by 2 years. He saw an author field that never once said Derek. He saw an email, quoted in a footnote, in which his newest vice president had asked me to write up your pricing thing so I can show it upstairs. I was not in the building for what happened next. I only know the shape of it from Priya and from the strange courtesy of the CEO himself, who did something I did not expect. He called me. He was not warm exactly, but he was direct, and I respected that. He said he'd read my report. He said he had some questions about the development history, and he asked them, and I answered them plainly with the evidence because I had all of it and had always had all of it. There was a long pause on the line. And then he said the sentence that, I'll admit, I had wanted to hear for a very long time, more than I'd wanted the money or the title or any of it. He said, "It seems we made a serious mistake about who built this." "Yes," I said, "you did." Derek was gone within the month. Not fired in a dramatic scene. Companies at that level don't do dramatic scenes. He decided to pursue other opportunities, which is the phrase powerful men are given to hold like an umbrella while the truth rains down around them. His VP title, his corner office, the $90,000 bonus already spent on the watch and the car, and the story he told at parties. All of it evaporated into a 2-line internal email wishing him well. The industry is small. People talk. The real story followed him the way the truth always eventually does, one quiet conversation at a time, and doors that had once opened for the man who built Meridian began, gently, to stay closed. I did not spread it. I never had to. I'd learned from the master. You don't have to say a word if the documents say it for you. My old director, the one who couldn't look at me at the elevator, reached out with a long, careful message about how she'd always known and had advocated for me behind the scenes. I read every word the way I read everything, and then I did not reply, which I found I could live with quite easily. The CEO offered me my old job back. Then, when I didn't jump, he offered me Derek's. Vice president, the corner office, more money than I'd ever made. I thought about it seriously, sitting in my car in the Vantage parking lot, looking at the building where I was already halfway through building a system that would take my old company apart contract by contract. I said no, politely. I told him I was happy where I was, which was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that I no longer had any interest in being the secret engine inside someone else's magic box. I'd spent 2 years being the reason a machine worked while another man took the stage. I wasn't going back to a place that had needed to fire me and watch itself bleed before it could see me. The system I built at Vantage came online 8 months later. I named it, and this time my name was the only one anywhere near it. It was better than Meridian. It should have been. I'd made every mistake already once on someone else's dime. Within a year, Vantage was winning the contracts we used to lose by those mysteriously precise margins, and my old company was on the other side of the equation now, losing deals they couldn't explain, feeling the exact cold draft I'd once created for them. Except this time, there was no woman quietly turning cranks in a back room who could ever be brought in to fix it. This time, the person who understood the machine was me, and I was theirs no longer. Priya came to work for me eventually. She'd earned it, being one of the few who'd said my name out loud when it mattered. Sometimes we talk about the ballroom, the standing ovation, Derek and his 40 uses of the word I. She asks me if I ever feel bad about how it went for him, about the drift I saw coming and said nothing about letting a $20 million system quietly rot to prove a point. And I tell her the truth, which is the same truth I've circled this whole time. I never broke anything. I never lied. I never took what wasn't mine. I only ever stopped giving away, for free and in secret, the one thing they'd decided was worthless right up until the moment it was gone. Me. Derek built nothing. He only stood in front of a slide with my work behind him and said, "I," until people believed it. And when the work walked out the door, all he was left holding was the word. I keep a copy of that report. 41 pages, the development history section flagged. I don't need it anymore, the story's long over, and I won. I keep it for the same reason I keep all my paper trails. Just in case anyone ever forgets, again, whose thing it really was.